Good morning, everyone. This is Mitch. Hope you guys are having a fantastic start to your Wednesday. As always, having a great work week. Want to give you one last big update on what is going on with the severe weather that's going to happen today for your Wednesday, March 30th. This evening, most people will be going live during the coverage here, and rightfully so. And I don't blame you guys for watching them one bit because you need to have a way to get updates. And there's a lot of people on YouTube that do a great job with live coverage. I can think of 3 or 4 right off the top of my head that do a great job of going live during these events. So stay tuned to their stuff. Some of them do better than the actual Weather Channel does. So definitely stay tuned, okay? So you guys want to have the best way to get alerts if you're in Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Eastern Arkansas, areas of Louisiana a little earlier in the afternoon. But this is going to be an all-day, probably all-night event, working from west to east. So I'm going to give you the latest information this morning on what is going on, and I'm going to kick it over to them guys to let them finish it off and go live here in the next couple hours. So nothing's really increased, nothing's really decreased, but we're going to go over the latest information and show you what's going on. So if you guys have not subscribed, definitely hit that subscribe button for me. Like the video if you like it. I appreciate y'all's amazing support over the last, really this whole year so far. It's really been amazing, and I really appreciate it, guys. Y'all guys got anything I can pray about? Please put it in the comments below. It gives me an opportunity to pray over it. Gives others an opportunity to do so too. And unfortunately, this is going to be a day where people's lives will be impacted forever. So we're hoping for the best. No deaths. You know, we can repair stuff, but we obviously can't get people's lives back. So hoping for the best. No deaths. So right now, there's still a moderate risk. This has not been upgraded to a high. Moderate risk still included for basically these same areas, including Jackson, Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee, Alexandria, Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Mobile, Alabama, almost into Birmingham, but enhanced area, right on the border of an enhanced and moderate for those folks. But tornado threat has actually been, it looks like it's been extended a little further north also, but still it's bordering these southern areas. A 15% risk of a tornado at 25 miles on any given location in this giant red area, basically covering the entire state of Mississippi and large portions of Louisiana and Alabama and a small portion of Arkansas for later this afternoon, and even an area of Tennessee. The hatched area, which is basically the black outlined area with the dashes going through it, that is a 10% risk of seeing a stronger tornado at 25 miles in a given location. A stronger tornado would be considered an EF2 or higher. So that's obviously stuff that starts to really destroy things completely off their foundation and things like that. When threat has actually been, I wouldn't say it's smaller, but it's been consolidated a little bit. But the wind threat is really going to be nasty for basically the entire state of Mississippi, large portion of Alabama, and even western Tennessee. Watch out. You guys are going to have a big time wind threat with this a little bit later this afternoon. This line of storms is going to move through. It's called a quasi-linear convective system. It's basically a squall line that moves through associated with a cold front. It's going to have some nasty winds mixing to the surface with a potent low-level jet about a mile above our heads in these areas. It's going to mix to the surface, and you're going to have, 40, 50 mile per hour wind gusts that are not associated with thunderstorms. It's pretty impressive. So going forward here, let's take a look at what is going on. And okay, let's talk about the Deep South first. And I'm going to talk about you folks in the Ohio Valley a little further north too. So let's take a look at what's going on. I tell you what, not a whole lot's changed. We'll keep this rolling here. We're getting into about midday. We're getting into, honestly, it's looking like it's slowed down a bit based off the latest model runs. I was talking about in Memphis, it arriving last night at around midday. It might arrive a little bit later in the afternoon, but it's very hard to predict the speed of these squall lines. They tend to move faster than what models try to predict. But one thing I worry about is I'll stop it right here. This is just starting to move out of eastern Arkansas and areas of the northern half of Louisiana. The further you go down this line, the more you have little hook indentions down here. You see down here how it's kind of broken up, and up here it's a little more congealed or together. That's where the nasty damaging winds are going to go. The further south you go down this line, the tornado threat I think increases due to more CAPE. CAPE values reaching well over 500 to close to 1,000 joules per kilogram, especially you get later in the afternoon down here in this area. When you add just a couple hundred levels of CAPE or joules per kilogram of CAPE, it really increases the dynamics to create a tornadic setup. It really does. Just a little bit of CAPE, it does wonders for these tornadoes. They feed off of it, they feed off that juice, and then they start popping off here. So right here, you got to watch out for these individual cells that form ahead of this line. These can be dangerous too, so watch out, the northern half of Mississippi if these pop out later this afternoon. But this line really moves through, and it starts to pick up a little bit more speed on the top end. The southern end kind of starts to slow down and tail off, and you stop it right here. This is getting into, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, give or take an hour. And the squall line is moving through western Tennessee. It's kind of starting to break up here a little bit, but it's really put together down here in Tennessee. Just nasty, damaging winds, 60, 70, maybe as much as 80-mile-per-hour winds. But down here, look how it breaks up a little bit. This is what worries me for you folks down here in the swamp areas of Louisiana, the Bayou, New Orleans, Baton Rouge. It starts to break up here. There's dew points pushing, in the low 70s down here. You got Cape values that are starting to rise above this line. Dynamics are pushing ahead of this line with a collapsing moist sector. And these storms down here really worry me for, the same areas that were slammed by a tornado last week. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we have some tornado warnings down here as we're getting into later in this afternoon. We keep this rolling here. And this line looks pretty solid as you're getting into late afternoon, early evening as it's reaching the Alabama-Mississippi state line. It'll reach the Alabama-Mississippi state line a little quicker on the northern half up here than it does in the middle or the southern. As this kind of begins to fan off, one thing that lacks down here is the kinematics. The low-level wind field is not as potent as it is up here, and that is what is promoting such a nasty, damaging wind threat as this begins to move through. Just as the sun's starting to kind of go down in Huntsville, Alabama, Birmingham, this really starts to slam you guys. Now, I don't want to discredit or discount this tornado threat with this line of storms, because this is going to be a classic example where you have embedded tornadoes in this squall line. I mean, they're going to be all over it, and they're impossible to predict where it's going to be. One thing that's a little bit more easier to predict is you're going to have a higher end tornado potential, I really think, on average down here. The kinematics won't be lacking, but they won't be as high as they are up here. That wind energy is what I mean when I say kinematics. So a dangerous situation starts to move into southern Mississippi, starts to move closer to Mobile as the sun is down now at this point. It's later evening. It's getting closer to midnight, 11 p.m., if that. And this begins to move into Mobile, and I'm really worried about far southwest Alabama, southern sections of Alabama near Mobile, and areas of southern Mississippi. And then sun is well down at this point. I mean, you're pretty much in the overnight hours, and starts to move in the western panhandle of Texas, of Florida, and the tornado threat increases overnight. But then you start to lose some of the forcing. You start to lose something dynamics as you obviously have lost daytime cooling, but I still think there'll be an overnight tornado threat down here, something to really pay attention to. But nasty weather begins to move in Atlanta and then southeast Alabama, but it begins to lose some of its steam for sure. We look a little further up in the Ohio Valley. You guys are going to have a nasty line of storms moving all the way from Illinois, all the way, like I said, down to the Gulf of Mexico. But the one thing y'all are lacking up here is thermodynamics, which is your higher end dew points. You're lacking Cape. You're lacking just overall warmer temperatures. But one thing you have in your favor is kinematics, wind energy. You got the low-level jets screaming up here. So you're going to have a less consolidated line of storms. It's almost going to be like a more just broadened area of very heavy rain and storms, some lightning. But one thing you're going to have is stronger winds. As you're getting into later this afternoon in Indiana, this begins to knock on your doorstep. You're getting into this evening in western Kentucky. One thing you'll notice is before your moisture moves in, you'll have a lot of winds, 30, 40 mile per hour winds ahead of this line. But once you get into these storms later this evening, these winds will mix to the surface. And, this is, for example, this is out of around the 11 p.m. midnight time frame tonight, and you still have a broken up line of storms moving through Kentucky. These will mix to the surface. It's going to be a rocky night of weather all the way up through Kentucky. I really think it is, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And we look at these winds. We're going forward here in time. We'll stop it right here. This is for early this afternoon, this coming afternoon. This is the line of storms right here. This is, a couple hundred, 100 or so miles ahead of the line. So you got, like I've been mentioning this the last 48 hours, you got winds above the line in front of the line, not above the line, all the way up here, reaching 30, 40, maybe as much as 50 miles per hour. So the wind with this is going to be insane. And obviously, it's going to be its own beast just associated with the line, where you'll have wind gusts pushing, I think on average along the line, 60 to 70 miles per hour. But you keep going through the afternoon hours and the evening hours, and the winds are screaming in the southern Appalachian Mountains. I mean, in these higher tops like the Smokies, oh man, I mean, you got to think. Some of these mountains in the Smokies, are 4, 5, 6,000 feet tall, at least 4 or 5 on average in the highest elevations. So what you got to think is the low-level jet's sitting at about a mile above our heads. So the low-level jet's sitting at about 5, 6, 7,000 feet, give or take 1,000. So these higher elevations are nosing into that low-level jet, where winds are even faster, pushing 70, 80, 90 knots. So the winds are going to be insane in any higher elevations in the mountains, all the way up through West Virginia, Virginia, and PA. It's because the nose of those higher mountaintops reach the more higher areas aloft. So you keep this going, and winds, are going to pick up in the Carolinas, and it's just going to be gusty. Winds, I mean, stronger winds all the way up to Cleveland, Ohio, all the way down to the panhandle of Florida, and then everywhere in between. Strong winds all day, all night tonight. It's going to be a rocky night. So what you got going on, here's the dew points. A collapsing moist sector dew points briefly rising into the 60s, close to 70 down here in Louisiana. This is the danger zone for tornadoes. I really think it's going to be. I really think it is, guys. Down here, danger zone, because you got them higher in dew points pushing 70, and you got the Cape. It's lacking, not lacking, but it's a little bit less kinematics, but I'm telling you, it's enough to really have a dynamic atmosphere for tornadoes. Then the stable air moves in, and then we're good for at least a few days. I'm already looking at a severe weather potential for next week. It's just nonstop right now. This is Cape. This is big. I hope you guys have continued to watch the video, because this is important. The reason why we have a high-end tornado threat, I think, down in these areas is because Cape builds. For example, I'll stop this probably about 9, 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. Look at these Cape values reaching over 1,200 joules per kilogram mixed layer Cape down here in further southern areas of Mississippi. And when I say southern areas of Mississippi and Alabama, I'm meaning like pretty much the coastal regions all the way touching the Gulf of Mexico. This is where I think the tornado threat will be maximized as we get later this evening and overnight. This is when it gets dangerous, as Cape briefly spikes. You see all this nasty Cape down here in the Gulf? Well, Cape really spikes down here. So you got to watch for a tornado threat. And you see it here. Significant tornado parameter. I think it spikes here in a few hours here in Louisiana. But then again, it gets going here in New Orleans, Baton Rouge. Watch out. A little bit later this afternoon, early this evening. And then it really cranks up right here as the sun begins to go down, which is, very dangerous because the sun's down. And, you see STP values reaching, 7, 8, 9 in these regions briefly before more stable air moves through. So I really think later this evening, as the sun goes down, in these sections with the highest tornado threat, but do not discount the damaging wind threat, guys. That is actually probably the biggest reason why you have a moderate risk in these areas. But the tornado threat does not need to be discounted. Neither one of them do. So that's all I got, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. Please stay safe out there for sure. This is going to affect millions of people. So definitely look out for your neighbor. Make sure they're aware. God bless all y'all. Stay safe. And I'll talk to y'all when I'll talk to y'all again.